All right, welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am your host, Una, and we have Crypto again with us today.
What's up, guys?
Today we're going to do a Let's Read with a literary classic, John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. And boy, was this a good read for me as a older gentleman in my 30s now as opposed to high school. Usually we'll break it down into various chapters. This book is a novella. It's short. It's only like 100 pages depending on the printing. So we'll go through the first few sections through quotes, overall thoughts, and then when we start getting into the summary, that's when we'll hit spoilers. But until then, you're safe. But the Let's Read section is meant to kind of break down the book instead of just saying, "Oh, I liked it. I like this character." We're going to do a little bit more deeper dive and have some good discussion about it because we need more people talking about books, right? So
Yes.
All right. So first off, Mr. Crypto.
Okay. No. Before we start, new tradition at the CodeX Cantina. We're going to start off with what we're drinking for the evening because we might be doing this at night more often now because I'll be going back to work and we won't be able to record during the day because it won't be summertime for me anymore because I'm a teacher. And I am drinking a vodka soda this evening.
I'm doing Of Mice and Men with the dirty IPA right here, the good old Liftoff.
Okay.
If you're ever in the Indianapolis area, Liftoff is what you need in your body. All right. So with that,
let's get into this.
Hit me with it. We haven't talked. I have no idea what your thoughts are on this. You and I both read this in high school.
Yes.
30-year-old men. What are your thoughts on Of Mice and Men in 2019?
Yeah, so I haven't, like most people maybe watching this, haven't read this book since high school. It was forced upon us. And then at the end, my teacher let us watch the movie, which was kind of cool.
Which one?
The one with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich, who plays Lennie. And Gary Sinise, Lieutenant Dan, plays...
Why couldn't you just put the bunny back in the box?
Yeah. So we got to watch the movie afterwards. So I hadn't read it since then. So I didn't remember a lot of it. Basically, just the two highlights of the whole thing, which is the stuff that you kind of really remember. And
do you remember how it ended?
Right.
We're not gonna say what the ending is, but do you remember how it ended?
Yeah, I remember kind of the climax in the middle of the story, and then I remember how it ended. And those are the two highlight points. And I kind of forgot all the other little details in there and how historical it is. And then me personally researching a little bit about Steinbeck and you researching it. Maybe we'll have a kind of little discussion about that. But I hadn't read it since high school. But my overall thoughts so far is I really love the language. I like the different context of the book. We read so much nowadays online, and it's all tweets and Facebook posts, and it's nothing of depth or substance. And I have a quote to kind of talk about later to go with that. What are your thoughts?
You know, I gotta say, that's one of my biggest pet peeves when people talk about novellas, is they give the novella excuses. Like, well, it's just a novella. You know, the characters, they weren't given enough time to breathe. And it's like, no. If your characters don't have a point, if they don't, I'm not gonna say evolve, but if there's not like a narrative relevance to them, that's an issue with the novella and the storytelling, not with the fact that it's a novella. There are books like this where I feel like you get a good sense of the characters, but also I think when it comes to novellas, maybe not this one because it is, you know, taking place back in the Great Depression. You know, I haven't lived then, obviously. But some novellas, like, you know, characters like that. You know the guy that's going to just say the stupid thing, or you know the guy that's just, like, real terse and, like, real gruff and just, like, is just, like half the time. So I've been really into Southern novels lately. I've been reading Faulkner. It's been a while since I've read Steinbeck, but like the gritty, dirty South, I'm into that, and I'm really into. And why I chose this book, why I wanted us to read this, is because I'm really into just kind of like a terse and true approach when it comes to writing. As you know, I've got us lined up for do some Hemingway next, so I think you're gonna like that. But I don't know if you've read. Have you read Hemingway before?
A little bit.
Okay.
Probably high school, college. So again, it's been 20 plus years.
They've got different teachers, but it's the same mentality of just trying to be as true and direct to the point as possible. And what's really interesting about this book is, did you know that, well, I mean, you probably noticed that when you opened up each chapter, it starts off with like scenery.
Yes.
And then it's like almost pure dialogue, and people come in and out of the scene, but it takes place as a scene
Very quickly.
That was all by design. John Steinbeck wanted to write like an almost script-like novel. He wasn't a playwright. He said it was like a mix between a playwright and a novel. It was kind of an in between. He had a word for it, like play novel or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but that was by design. And part of his teachings at Stanford taught him to just be as brief and concise as possible, and that's why he can get away with a beautiful 100-page book that maybe started out much bigger but got edited down. Who knows? But it's very valuable, I think, when you're reading through it.
Definitely.
Playable novel. That was the word that Steinbeck used. I haven't heard your quotes, so this is going to be interesting because usually you don't pick dialogue, but you kind of have to with this book. It's a lot of dialogue and not as much character thinking from like a third person narrative. Kind of an interesting approach. So let me hear what one of your quotes are.
I like this to kind of talk about the book overall of us just on this channel, is to stare into the past is to know oneself. And I think that's very relevant to us talking about these older books, reading them 20, 30 years later, because we are looking into the past and reflecting upon the changes of our lives and how that's affected us and how we have changed. And I think that really kind of sums up everything. Maybe like the whole point of the channel is to stare into the past is to know oneself. And I thought that was pretty deep.
Oh yeah, I've got a quote. I'll pull it out for you sometime, but I've got a quote where they talk about reading a book is getting to know yourself. Like, books sometimes explain things to you about your emotions that you've never been able to put into words, just very beautifully. And that's why I love reading too. So I fully agree with that quote. Dude, that makes my quotes seem so bad. Mine are like so narrative.
I got two narrative ones too. I'm looking for the pictures.
Mine are just straight, like, these are really important to the plot. Like, you just totally showed me up. I'll hit you with one of mine. I got two. One is, and I think this is really important, but I ought to have shot the dog myself, George. I shouldn't have let no stranger shoot my dog. Obviously, Candy, talking about his dog there.
And why did you pick that one? What's?
We're going to get into it in the analysis. We're going to do the summary next, and that's when we'll do official spoilers. I don't want to... You and I talk about this where I tend to pick up on something very specific that when authors leave specific hints, I pick up on it very frequently. We'll go into that next in the analysis.
Here's another one that really struck home with me because I just say it. You know, I don't have a lot of friends. You know, when you get into your 40s and you have a family and a job, you don't have time like you did in high school and college. Just sit around with your dudes and go to the bar and play video games, and you don't have that much time anymore.
And if you're a high schooler and you're like, I'm gonna have friends, write that down. Put a timer to remind yourself when you are in your 30s, come back to this. You will see what happens as you get older.
And I think that, like, the internet's a great thing because, you know, you and I are good friends and we have a few other really good friends. And I have, you know, my brother-in-laws and I have my wife and stuff, you know, and she's probably my best friend. But this quote really kind of nailed it for me. Crooks is talking and he says, "A guy goes nuts if he ain't got nobody. Don't make no difference who the guy is, long as he's with you. I tell you," he cried, "I tell you, a guy gets too lonely, he gets sick." And I think that's true because, like, if you have no friends, you're going to get depressed. And I think that's kind of the sickness that Steinbeck was talking about, is you're going to get depressed if you don't have anybody to be with. And Crooks is lonely because he has to be by himself all the time because he's a black guy, and they're mistreating him because it's 100 years ago and they were really terrible to people back then. So
we had freedom, but we didn't really. And this is just such a sensitive and beautiful part to me, to see the human spirit struggle for what it deserves. And that's part of why I love a lot of Southern Gothics. And I have a very fun Faulkner book planned for you too that I'm looking forward to see how you think. I already think, I feel like I know I feel like I know what your analysis points are going to be just based on that quote right there.
Okay, that's fair. All right, you got another one?
We'll
or
get into it. I got
okay,
one more.
I got one more after that.
Okay, and you're going to be able to guess what my analysis point is from this. I've seen hundreds of men come by on the road and on the ranches with their bindles on their backs and that same damn thing in their heads, and never a goddamn one of them ever gets it. Just like heaven, everybody wants a little piece of land. I read plenty of books out there. Nobody never gets to heaven, and nobody gets no land. It's just in their head.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, let's hit me with your last one.
It's Crooks again. He's talking about, I ain't a Southern Negro. I was born right here in California. My old man had a chicken ranch, about 10 acres. The white kids came to play at our place, and sometimes I went to play with them, and some of them were pretty nice. My old man didn't like that. I never knew till long later why he didn't like that, but now I know. He hesitated, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. There wasn't another colored family for miles around, and now there ain't a colored man on this ranch, and there's just one family in Soledad. And if I was saying something, why is it just a N-word saying it? So yeah, that one hit me because you know, it's the isolationism again. Before he feels isolated as a man with no friends, and now he feels isolated again by his race, and I think that's huge nowadays. I think that a lot of people feel isolated because of many different things: their race, money, sexual orientation. A lot of people feel isolated. And back then, there's nothing he could do about it. Nowadays, thankfully, we're a little bit better of people than our great-great-grandparents were.
And that's so interesting how isolation was a big thing back then. Like, you think about kids didn't have video games or the internet to get lost on and spend time.
Right.
But they had other ways to still alienate themselves from people and still feel lonely. Today, while we've moved beyond some of those things, we still have, in modern day, feelings of isolation just due to other reasons, other more modern technological things, but we have the same struggles as a human race. Yep. Interestingly enough, I hadn't really thought about that. All right, we ready to do summary?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, we're going to do spoilers from here on out. So we're going to go through the summary, and then we're going to do some analysis of the book, basically.
Spoiler alert.
Spoilers. All right, so it's the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression. We follow two farmhands, George and Lennie, as they search for work. Lennie is the childlike one with some undefined cognitive challenges.
Which you want to talk about later.
Okay. And George is the small in stature, large in words member talker of the group. They head to a farm to work. They meet a wide cast of characters at the local farm. Curly seems to be like the arrogant ex-athlete recalling his glory days, picking on fights with people, son of the boss guy. George warns Lennie to steer clear of this danger because Lennie, being challenged, could easily walk into trouble. Again, there's been a couple references of them running from trouble. There's an important scene with Candy and his dog, whether they should shoot the dog because it's old, smelly, and unwanted. Candy tells George he shouldn't have let the stranger shoot his dog, my quote. Lennie kills a mouse by petting it too much in the beginning. He does it again to the puppy. Eventually, he does it to Curly's wife, where he's touching soft things and eventually somehow kills the...
Then that was one of the things I kind of remembered was that, I mean, it's called Of Mice and Men, and I completely forgot about the mouse in the beginning. All I remembered was Curly's wife getting her neck broke, and then the end.
And I think the Of Mice and Men speaks also, on top of just the mouse being a huge pivotal point, also speaks to like the classes in terms of like the mice are the working hand, the people that will never get ahead, and then the men are the owning class, like the boss that, you know, will always be in charge. I think there was a big social divide during the Great Depression era.
Probably the biggest ever, except for maybe now.
And I think this kind of spoke to that too. On top of that, Curly. So when he kills Curly's wife, Curly forms a hunting party to hunt Lennie down. George finds Lennie at their emergency meeting place, and reluctantly, I don't know if that's the right word, but I don't know what word would you use here when he says, I mean, George kills his best friend, Lennie. And that's a good discussion point of did he have to or why. But he kills him.
I think he sacrifices him.
It's a good word too.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different words depending on how you view this. So let's jump into analysis. You want to go first, or should I?
You can start us off. Yeah.
Okay. And I think you know a little bit more about John Steinbeck and his history than I do, so I want you to jump in here. But I want to kind of talk about...
I have the book, or one of the versions of the book. My camera's so terrible. I got this from the library.
You got like a biography section?
Okay, so at the end here, the novel that would become Of Mice and Men, he began writing in January of 1936, and it was a children's book. And he started it several times, and he couldn't finish the book. And there was setback after setback. At one point in time, his dog ate the manuscript. And
I heard about that.
And he lost everything. Eventually, he completed the book in August of 1936, and then it was published the next year in February of 1937.
Which is the 8th year of the Depression, just to mark that, like Dust Bowl Depression.
Yeah.
We're getting hit hard with it as he's writing this, right?
Yes. And then,
do you know the original title of what this book was going to be called? It's real forgettable. Get this. You ready for this?
Yeah, what was it?
Something that happened.
Oh, that is very forgettable.
Yeah. Isn't it very just not committal to anything?
Yeah.
What I know is, he went to school at Stanford. He eventually dropped out. He never even got his degree. But that's where he learned to be terse and true.
Yeah.
Right? Then he met. I'm sure you've probably heard some stories or read something about Edward Ricketts, one of his best friends, who's a marine biologist.
Yep.
So he was very big into, I think most people would attribute it to the selfish gene theory, where animals don't have morals the way humans do, right? They don't have a justness. It's just a survival system to them, for the most part. So he wanted to write this book where he wasn't passing judgment in his writing. He just wanted to write the truest statement. This is what happened. When Lennie killed an animal, or when Lennie killed Curly's wife, he didn't try to pass judgment onto Lennie or the action. He just tried to describe it and allow the reader to internalize what that would mean. And it actually was his friend, Edward Ricketts, that recommended that he change the title of the book of something that happened to Of Mice and Men, which is the old, 17-something To a Mouse poem, which basically had a lot of the same notes, but he didn't take that poem and write this book based on that. But it hit on a lot of the same notes, where basically in this poem, a farmer churns through a nest of a mouse, and he's just like, well, sorry about that. Like, I feel bad, but this is what happens when you make plans. They go awry, like they go wrong. And that's kind of what you see in this book with a lot of people making plans, and some things can go wrong. And then it's just kind of saying not everything's in your control. You can do the best that you can, but that doesn't mean things are going to go the way that you planned on it.
Well, I guess, so the way that it goes down time-wise is he writes the book, and it gets destroyed, and then his friend tells him to rewrite it, but do it as a dramatic adaptation, because somebody had read it, the very first manuscript, and his buddy John O'Hare tells him to rewrite it in a dramatic adaptation. Okay. And then and that's his lifelong friend, and then he goes on a 6-day trip with Ricketts along the Baja coast, collecting octopuses, and they hang out together. The two buddies hang out all of July, and then he finishes it in August on the recommendation of Ricketts. Yeah, so that's... Yeah.
Okay. And did you know that? Did you know about the poem?
No, I didn't know about the poem.
I think I could be totally off on this. I'm not really into poetry, but I think it's like John Burns' To a Mouse. And it's really, it's not just like straight English. It's old. I can't even describe it.
Yeah, I'm not big into poetry, so...
Yeah, it's difficult to read, but that this isn't a direct quote. It's misquoted, but like the best laid plans go wrong or something like that. It's kind of evolved from that poem.
Gotcha.
So very interesting, but I think that is kind of why this this book novella exists because what we know is Steinbeck did spend time as a migrant worker, right? He actually did know a Lennie character. Like, his name wasn't Lennie, but he did know a mentally challenged person. And people in this book were collections of people that he met. Like, he kind of combined or picked personalities from people. And this is a realism book, right? Like, this isn't just straight made up, like he's making up characters. This is based on his experiences. And the character that, real life Lennie that
historical
he knew
fiction
actually was mentally challenged. And he actually did kill, not a woman, but a farmhand that he got in an argument with, stabbed him with a pitchfork, and now lives, well, at the time, lived in a California insane asylum.
Oh.
Right? Like, that could have been the Lennie in this book, but he kind of took it a different direction in terms of, what friendship meant between
A little less violent.
Debatable, right? Yeah. I mean... This book is very emotionally violent for me. I really felt for Lennie. It's very easy to fall in love with Lennie. Right?
Oh yeah.
And then to have the best friend look at this situation. You could look at a modern reinterpretation of this, and you could see them doing some stupid Bonnie and Clyde where they try to get away, or you could just see them changing it where it's not as poetic and purposeful, which I think I want to get into what I was talking about earlier, where I've been able to predict a lot of deaths in books that we've read, and it's always based on clues that the author has put in and said that this is going to happen.
There's so many clues in this book.
There are a ton.
Oh, so much foreshadowing in this book. Like, if you didn't know halfway through that George was going to kill Lennie, you didn't read the book, or you read it at 16. And you were just trying to get through it so you can get your paper written and get an A and move on with your life because your girlfriend is texting you or something.
That was me. That was me back in the day.
That was me too.
Yeah. So anyways, I think that was a big part of what this book was for me, thinking about it being written during the Depression when you had a huge discrepancy between the rich and the poor. The poor had those dreams of how they're going to get ahead and, I just save up this money and then I'm going to do it. And then you had that quote from Crooks where, he talks about everybody has these plans, but they don't always work out, right? Like George's plans didn't work out. Lennie's didn't work out. Curly's wife wanted to be the actress, in pictures. Crooks wanted a friend. Even the bus driver, in terms of dropping them off, didn't make it to the end. He dropped them off earlier than he was supposed to.
Yeah. Candy he got to be part of the dream for a little bit, and they were all just, remember when they're sitting there in the book and they're all just staring, and you could just feel the energy between them and the positivity and them all just their dreams coalescing together. It all gets shattered. It's crazy.
You mentioned you saw the Gary Sinise rendition of it. It's super faithful. Like any adaptation, there's going to be some differences. They changed some things with Curly's wife to be a little bit more picture friendly, how they started it off. But in terms of just dialogue, book to movie, super faithful. They changed a few more where scenes took place just to have some visual interest, I think. But that scene when they're all dreaming, they're all doing the looking up into space and really it's they do a good job of that. But you're exactly right. They're all dreaming about the big American dream, and that you can have the best laid plans, but if you're whoever you are, whether you're a farmer, whether you're a mouse, something can come along and ruin them, and that's all it was.
Real quick, what did you think of John Malkovich's portrayal of Lennie? Because I felt like that was the only thing in the movie that I wasn't 100% okay with.
Thank you. I was telling my wife that actually I didn't love the Malkovich version.
I didn't love the Malkovich version.
No. There's an audiobook recording of it too. Nails Lennie. Love that rendition of Lennie. Almost like the giant from the Mickey Mouse Beanstalk story. Just a huge guy that's gentle of heart. That's Lennie to me. And Malkovich, while he's a great actor, and I think he did a wonderful portrayal of Lennie. It wasn't my Lennie that I wanted to see come out. And there's just a few discrepancies there with how sensitive he was and approached that role as opposed to how I thought the book and Steinbeck wanted it approached.
Yeah, if I could, I like Gary Sinise. I think that he did an awesome job. If I could recast and just take out John Malkovich and leave Gary Sinise and everybody else, you'd never guess in a million years of who I would put into that role as Lennie. Just take a guess, or who would you put in there?
You want me to guess?
Who would you put in there?
I'm gonna do an oddball. You're putting me on the spot here, but I'm gonna go with the oddball. What's his name? Liv Schreiber.
Oh, okay, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay, he's a decent actor.
I'd want to see him come in for casting to see what he could do for that role.
So here's mine, and it's way out there. And if you haven't seen one specific movie, you won't agree at all. But if you have seen this one movie that he did, you might agree of how dramatic of an actor, what range this guy has. And he's perfect for the size because he's actually a really big dude, is Vince Vaughn.
Okay, what movie is kind of like
Brawl in Cell Block 99.
Never heard of it.
It came out like 2 years ago. I think it was like direct to video, but I remember watching it about a year or so ago. And he it's not funny. It's very, very dark. He just plays this brutal bad guy sort of, and if you see that, you'll be like, all right, he's got acting talent. He's got chops. He can do more than just a funny man. And he's big and brutal, and like he just beats the crap out of everybody in this movie. And I think that Vince Vaughn would be an amazing Lennie. Anyway, we digress. We've gone too far off topic. Let's talk about where everybody's going and what everybody's kind of hopes and dreams are, because that drives us towards the culmination of kind of like the highlight of the, I guess, besides the very end, the end of the second act, I guess you could say. I guess them wanting to have their own piece of property and having all of that is the driving force of them being there, wanting to have money, and her desire of wanting to be noticed. She wanted to be the movie star, and so she just wants attention.
She wanted to be in them pictures.
She wants attention from everybody, and they even call her a tart, which I guess is their version of whore or slut.
You've never heard tart before?
Nah, not in high school nowadays. They don't call each other tarts. They're much worse words.
I guess you're a lot more hip than me, but yeah, dude, tart. That's a good one.
No, they have some much more colorful, horrible language that they call each other. No, I didn't really know what tart meant, but I got it from context that it was a floozy, a slut, a whore, or whatever. And she just wants attention from everybody, and there's, this interaction between Lennie and her, and it goes wrong horribly, and he accidentally kills her, just like he kind of does everything because he doesn't know his own strength. The whole thing could have been changed or avoided, or were they destined for this to happen?
Well, this was destined to happen for the following reasons, okay? Opening chapter. This is one of my talking points, too, so you've segued into this. Yeah. Quote, first chapter. But you ain't going to get in no trouble, because if you do, I won't let you tend the rabbits.
The rabbits. The rabbits.
Them rabbits, yeah. Right? And he says, because I can just go away, George, and live in a cave. George says, you can just as well go to hell. Okay? And he repeats that line 2 more times, you can just go to hell. Okay? So then we have the candy scene. Okay? And he says, I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't have ought to let no stranger shoot my dog. So he says dog, but what is dog? Man's best friend, right? What is
Lennie? Is George's dog.
Lennie is George's best friend. It's his dog. So I thought this scene was interesting because beforehand, also, did you notice what game they were playing with cards?
Solitaire. Yeah. And he always plays solitaire, and he tried playing games with somebody else.
No. Hang on. This is very important. After the dog is killed, they change the game. they play euchre after that,
Yeah.
which is a social game. So the dog dies where everyone's solitary, right? So in a sense, George signed up to have this baggage with protecting, being the owner, protector of Lennie. So when Candy's dog is shot, they suddenly can be social. Like he's let go of this dog baggage. The dog was smelly, it was mangy, it was keeping Candy busy, and Carlson's like, dude, put the dog down. The dog, it's done. It's tying you down. You need to move.
Yeah, the dog is Lennie. The dog is Lennie.
And then guess what happens? Lennie walks back onto the scene. George switches back to solitaire.
Yeah.
That's very clear to me, to have gone from like this like a singular player game a single player game in a sense, to a social game when the dog dies. Then when that dog comes back, Lennie, he switches back to solitaire, which I think goes to the point earlier of the dreams, right? Can George achieve this when he's constantly being dragged down? What Steinbeck, I think, is saying by Lennie, and Lennie's issues become George's issues. So, and then at the end, when they're sitting there in the Garden of Eden again, he says, George, ain't you going to give me hell?
Man.
And then when it happens, what's the last line of the book? It's the last line, the last paragraph of this book. Curly and Carlson looked after them, and Carlson said, now what the hell you suppose is eating them two guys? So again, it goes back to them not really understanding each other, and that loneliness that they felt, that these guys couldn't even understand the togetherness that Lennie and George had.
Yeah. And I also, I think that the way that, and I want to bring back up to your point of when you were talking about like the different people and the characterization of, there are series out there that have 10, 15, 20 books in the series, or like a TV show or a movie or anything, that sometimes people make excuses that in a novella or 100 or 200 pages that there's not enough time to develop these characters, but that Lennie is very fleshed out, George is very fleshed out, Candy is fleshed out. I mean, I can envision Vince Vaughn playing this character. I can envision his voice that he does for him. I can envision, his mannerisms, his tics, and it's all fleshed out in a very, very short book. So yeah, that's a total cop-out in saying that a good character can't be developed in a short amount of time period, because you grow to care about these two characters, and you see the love between these two men, of how they become companions, and more than just companions, but brothers. And I think at the end there, like with Curly and Carlson, they don't have empathy, and that's something that's very interesting in their characterization.
Well, is it they? I think it's too bold to say they don't have empathy. I think it's a lack of connection, that they don't throughout this whole book, no one understood the connection that Lennie and George have.
Yeah.
Everyone that brought that up, that says, kind of strange, two guys to be walking around, like, what's going on? You taking his pay? So I think it's more of a commentary on them lacking that understanding of connection, of bond that Lennie and George had.
Yeah. And I think that, real quick, the last thing I was saying about the characters is that, to me, like when he's writing this, he's writing it a little bit generic. And nowadays, I think that if he had some of the information that we have now, where a lot of authors, when they write books, if they include like guns, they do a lot of research, so they have a lot of technical stuff. Or if they have like medical things, they'll look up and have like legit stuff, so it sounds more plausible and realistic. I think that he would have researched a little bit more into mental illnesses, and Lennie would have been autistic, high functioning autistic, and maybe with mild schizophrenia, because he does hallucinate there at the end when he's freaking out and he's having what I would consider, I'm doing air quotes right now, an episode, and he starts hallucinating about the bunny and stuff. So I don't know.
How well written was that too?
Oh yeah, so good.
the entering of his mind finally, where in today's age, if you had like a horror director that was turning this into a visual script, a playwright, whatever, you could have easily taken Lennie and shifted his character, because Steinbeck, like we said earlier, he tried to write these characters with no judgment, where a horror director would take that and they'd make him appear more deranged, and were these killings actually on purpose, they might take that angle and stuff like that. So I just think it's a really rich novella with the way how quick, terse, true all the lines and dialogue are, that it's just a clean script that it's kind of like, depending on what you want to throw at it, you can take out of it. You know what I mean? Like even Curly's wife, how she has no name. If you were wanting to take the angle of like this book being bashing women, which I don't think it is, like you could take that angle in a sense where it's like, well, why is it the only woman in this has no name? So overall, I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 is what I'm going with.
Okay.
Where are you? Because we haven't talked about this. Where are you on this?
So I think as a high schooler, I probably would have given it a 5 or a 6 at best. And mainly because I was big into, I still am big into sci-fi and fantasy, but I was big into the Wheel of Time series and the Sword of Truth, those 2 fantasy series at the time, and a little bit of Star Wars. Now I would probably give it a solid 8. Like I think it's
okay.
I think it's worth reading, but I don't think it is perfect, and I think that you have to get past some of the language, and it's going to be offensive to probably some people. There's a lot of people that take take easy offense, and I'm pretty liberal guy, but I can understand that the classroom or a museum, a book, is a place to have this type of story, this type of word, this type of, it's a safe place. And I think that some people might not feel that way. And that would be sad because they've been missing out on a good book. It's a good book. It's worth reading.
A great book. It's a great book. Did you know that this is one of the most requested books to be removed from like school libraries and such? Like this was a banned book in a sense.
Yeah.
And it's the language of all things. Like I think I would have thought that you never know why parents want to protect their children. I think they have their best interest at heart. And I don't think every parent that wants a book banned necessarily has to be a literary critic to be able to really defend why. I get it. So I don't want to defend. I want to pull the John Steinbeck here, where I'm not defending or attacking a person that thinks that. But I think there's a lot to be said about what is said about a character in scene versus not on scene. That I don't understand why this book would be banned. To be honest, it's the
N word probably, and I think that's really really crappy of people to want to do that because we know it's a terrible word, but it's a teachable moment. I mean, the kid reads it and they come home and they're like, "Mom, like people got mad about this, and like why?" Or and like, "Dad, let's talk about this. Like, why you don't use that language?"
Here's the one area. Okay, we're gonna sign off after this, but here's the one area where I think you could try to make a case for that. Is that they say when they're talking about Curly's dog, they say that he's smelly, unwanted, so they should just kill it.
Yeah.
And they almost use those exact same words when Crooks is approached in his room by Lennie, where he's talking about smell and being unwanted, him being the only black person. I think you could try to make a case there that this would be anti-black in a sense because of that. But I just don't think that that's what was happening there. That's not my interpretation I took from it, but I could see if someone was looking for it, you could make that interpretation.
But a teachable moment, and that's the great thing about a book.
Yeah. I think this is a great book with a lot of different angles that you can look at it. So of Mice and Men, I'm giving it a 9. Crypto with the 8. We've already read, and now we're going to do our audio recording after this. I'll release it after done editing. It'll probably take me another week, but we're going to go do Stephen King's Gwendy's Button Box next. So if you want to read along with us, that is, again, another novella. I don't know why we're doing so many novellas. My next one that I have for you actually is a little bit longer. I was going to
no spoilers. Don't give it away.
No spoilers. Yeah. But after Gwendy's Bet and Box, let's talk about the next book to do after.
And subscribe, like all that stuff. Leave down in maybe the comment section what book you want us to do next. I don't know.
I don't do the marketing thing. That's going to be a you thing. I'm not going to market.
Okay, that's a me thing. And cheers.
That's a you.
And tell us what you're drinking. Tell us what you're drinking in the comments too.
All right, guys.
Peace.
Happy reading. Signing off.